The cry of a newborn echoed through the small hospital in Lagos that night. But instead of joy, silence and fear filled the room. Nurses stood frozen, staring at the child wrapped in white cloth. The baby was beautiful, with dark, glowing skin and bright eyes. But there was something none of them expected. On her neck sat not one head, but two. One head cried like a normal baby, while the other blinked quietly, as if it understood what was happening. The mother, weak from childbirth, took one last look at her baby before closing her eyes forever. She never opened them again. The doctors whispered among themselves, calling it a curse. But the father of the child, a strong man named Mr. Chike, refused to let shame cover him. He held the baby close, tears rolling down his cheeks, and said, "This is my daughter, and I will love her." From that day, the child became both a miracle and a mystery in her neighborhood. People would gather outside the compound, whispering and pointing. Some called her a sign of bad luck, while others feared her presence. Relatives began to avoid Mr. Chike, blaming him for marrying the wrong woman and bringing strange blood into the family. Only one cousin, Ngozi, stood by his side, saying the child deserved love, not rejection. Her name was Amarachi, meaning grace of God. And though she had two heads, she grew with strength and intelligence. She was not disabled. She could walk, run, write, and even dance. But wherever she went, stares followed her. Men laughed and mocked, children cried out in fear, and women gossiped behind her back. But what nobody knew was that Amarachi's story, which started with death and shame, would later shake the entire community with something even more shocking, something that would happen years later when she herself became a mother. Growing up was never easy for Amarachi. Every time she walked to school, she felt the heavy eyes of neighbors burning into her back. Some children would point and shout, "Two head," while others ran away, terrified, as if she carried a disease. Yet Amarachi was smart. In class, she always came first, and even teachers respected her intelligence. But no matter how much she achieved, the shadow of her two heads followed her everywhere.
Her father, Mr. Chike, was her shield. He always told her, "My daughter, people fear what they do not understand. You are not cursed, you are special." His words kept her strong, but when the door closed at night, Amarachi often cried silently into her pillow. Sometimes she would stare at herself in the mirror, asking God why He made her this way. She imagined how life would have been if she had only one head like everyone else. The worst pain came from family gatherings. Relatives never truly accepted her. Some openly refused to eat from the same plate she touched. An aunt once shouted, "She is an abomination. She will never marry. Who wants a wife with two heads?" Amarachi tried to ignore them, but the words stuck deep inside her heart like thorns. At 16, loneliness became her closest friend. She started to think of ending her life, standing at the edge of the lagoon one evening with tears streaming down her cheeks. But at that moment, her cousin Ngozi found her and pulled her back. Ngozi hugged her tightly and said, "If the world rejects you, I will never reject you." Those words gave Amarachi new strength to live. Still, deep inside, she feared her aunt's words might come true. What man would ever look at her and not run away? What man would ever choose to build a family with someone like her? Amarachi did not know that years later, in the most unexpected place, her answer would come. Amarachi was now in her early 20s, tall, thick, and curvy, with beautiful dark skin that glowed under the sun. Her eyes were bright and full of intelligence, her smile radiant. If not for her 2 heads, she would have been considered one of the most attractive young women in her community. But beauty could not erase the fear and mockery that followed her everywhere. Men avoided her. Some laughed behind her back, saying they would never dare to walk beside a woman with 2 faces. Others used her name as a joke whenever they teased one another about marriage. Even in church, whispers always chased her. The choir once refused to let her join, saying her presence would distract the Spirit of God. Amarachi would go home with a heavy heart, asking herself if she was truly cursed.
It was in that same market that her story began to change. One afternoon, while buying foodstuffs, a young man helped her pick up oranges that had fallen from her basket. Most men would quickly run off after realizing who she was, but this man didn't. Instead, he smiled and said gently, "You should be more careful, madame." His voice carried no fear or mockery. Amarachi looked at him, surprised. No man had ever spoken to her like that. For the first time in her life, someone treated her like a normal woman. She did not know that this stranger would one day become the key to unlocking a future she never thought possible. The young man's name was Emeka. He was not rich, but he was hard-working, running a small provision store in the market. Unlike others, he did not flinch when he looked at Amarachi. Instead, he treated her with respect, greeting her warmly every time she passed his stall. At first, Amarachi thought he was pretending, maybe mocking her secretly like the rest. But as weeks turned into months, she realized his kindness was genuine. They began to talk often. Emeka would sometimes offer her discounts. Other times he would carry her bags to the roadside. Amarachi was shocked by how free he was with her. One evening when she returned home, she told her father about him. Mr. Chike's eyes lit up with hope. "My daughter," he said, "not every man is blind to your worth. Maybe this one sees your true heart." Still, Amarachi was afraid. She remembered the insults from her aunt and the laughter of boys who once mocked her in school. Could it be that Emeka only pitied her? Or worse, what if he was just pretending to get close before humiliating her? She kept her guard up, even though deep inside, her heart longed for love. One rainy afternoon, Emeka walked her home from the market. As they stood under the shade of a shop, waiting for the rain to stop, he turned to her and said, "Amarachi, I don't care what people say about you. You are beautiful, and you deserve happiness like anyone else." His words struck her like lightning. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the shock of hearing something she thought she would never hear in her lifetime. From that day, their bond grew stronger. But Amarachi did not know that Emeka's proposal, which came later, would shake her entire world, and the community that once mocked her would be forced to look at her in a new light. Months passed, and Emeka kept showing Amarachi kindness no man had ever given her. He visited her father at home, greeted him with respect, and slowly became part of their daily life. Neighbors started to whisper, wondering what kind of man could choose to spend so much time with a woman who carried 2 heads. Some said he was desperate. Others claimed he must be under a spell. But Emeka ignored all the talk and continued to draw closer. One evening, under the orange glow of a kerosene lamp in her father's sitting room, Emeka looked into Amarachi's eyes and said words she never thought she would hear. "Amarachi, will you marry me?" For a moment, the world went silent. Amarachi's 2 heads turned in different directions as her heart pounded. She thought of the insults she had endured, the loneliness she had carried for years, and the fear that no man would ever want her. Now here was someone offering her the one thing she had always prayed for. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Are you sure? "Do you really want me like this?" Emeka smiled and held her hand firmly. "I don't want anyone else. You are more than what people see. I want to spend my life with you." Her father, who had been listening quietly from a corner, broke into tears of joy. "God has finally answered my prayer. My daughter will not live in shame anymore." But outside, the news spread quickly, and not everyone shared the happiness. Some neighbors laughed loudly, calling Emeka a fool. Others said the marriage would never last. Even Amarachi's relatives came to warn him, saying, "You are throwing away your future. She is an abomination." But Emeka stood strong. "Love is not about what people see," he told them. "Love is about what the heart knows." And with that, the preparations for a wedding that shook the entire neighborhood began. The wedding day arrived, and the whole community gathered, not out of love, but out of curiosity. Some came to mock, some came to witness what they thought would be a shameful event. The church was filled, and whispers filled the air as Amarachi walked down the aisle in a flowing white gown. Her curvy body glowed under the fabric, her beautiful black skin shone, and both her faces looked stunning with carefully applied makeup. For the first time, instead of shame, she walked with confidence, her father by her side. Emeka stood at the altar in a well-tailored suit, his eyes fixed at her with nothing but love. When the priest asked if he truly wanted to marry Amarachi, the crowd held their breath, expecting hesitation. But Emeka's voice was firm and loud. "Yes, I do." Gasps filled the church. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others clapped softly. Then it was Amarachi's turn, and with tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Yes, I do." The vows were sealed, and when Emeka kissed her, people who once swore such a marriage could never happen saw love prove them wrong. Some guests left in anger, others stayed in shock, but a few began to respect Amarachi for her courage. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged to someone who accepted her fully. Life after the wedding was not easy. Gossip grew louder, and even in the market, customers would mock Emeka, asking why he chose the woman with two heads. But he always replied calmly, "She is my wife, and I love her." Their home became a place of peace, and slowly Amarachi began to smile again. Years passed, and God blessed them with children. Their first child was a boy, handsome and normal. Their second was a girl, beautiful and normal too. People were shocked and whispered, "How can children from such a mother look so perfect?" But Amarachi only smiled, grateful to God. However, after 5 years, when their third child was born, something unusual happened, something no one was prepared to see. The night Amarachi went into labor with her third child was stormy. Rain pounded heavily on the zinc roof, and thunder roared like angry drums. Emeka paced the hospital corridor nervously, while doctors rushed in and out of the delivery room. He prayed silently, hoping for another healthy baby like the first two. But deep inside, a strange fear gripped him. After long hours, the cries of a newborn finally pierced the air. Emeka's heart leapt with joy, but when the nurse stepped out, her face was pale. She held the baby close to her chest, refusing to show him at first. "What is wrong?" Emeka demanded, his voice shaking. Slowly, the nurse turned the baby toward him, and his eyes widened in shock. The child was alive and breathing, but there was something strange about its body, something no one had ever seen before. Unlike the first two children, this baby was born with a mark that glowed faintly across the chest, shaped like a second tiny face. It did not cry like normal babies. Instead, it made soft, humming sounds that unsettled everyone in the room. Some nurses refused to touch it, whispering that it was a bad sign. When Amarachi saw her child, tears flowed down both her faces. She stretched out her arms and said, "Give me my baby." She kissed the child gently and whispered, "You are mine, no matter what." But the fear in the room did not disappear. Even Emeka struggled to remain calm as he stared at the unusual sight. Word spread quickly through the hospital. By the next morning, people had already gathered outside, saying Amarachi had finally given birth to a spirit child. Some claimed the baby would bring misfortune. Others warned that keeping the child alive would curse the entire family. But Amarachi held her baby tighter. She remembered her own life, the rejection, the shame, the pain, and vowed she would never let her child feel the same. What she did not know was that this child's existence would open a chapter darker and more shocking than anything she had ever faced. Bringing the baby home was like carrying fire through a dry forest. The whole neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some neighbors refused to come close, whispering that Amarachi's third child was not an ordinary human being. Others spread lies that the baby's faintly glowing mark was a sign of witchcraft. Even her own relatives, who once despised her, came forward to suggest the child should be taken away. Emeka tried to remain strong, but at night he could not sleep. He would watch the baby lying in the cot, breathing softly, the strange mark on the chest pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Sometimes the baby's humming sound filled the room, not loud, but deep enough to make the air feel heavy. Amarachi, however, felt no fear. She looked at her child with love, stroking the tiny hands, whispering prayers, and reminding herself that rejection must never define this little life. But the strange events did not stop. One evening, when the baby was barely 2 weeks old, Emeka woke up to see their first son standing at the door of the bedroom, his eyes wide with fright. "Papa," the boy said, trembling, "the baby spoke to me." Emeka froze. Children often imagine things, but the boy swore he had heard a voice calling his name in the middle of the night, soft but clear. The following day, their little daughter also complained, saying she dreamed of the baby standing beside her bed, even though the child could not yet walk. Amarachi brushed it off as childish imagination, but deep inside, her heart grew heavy. She remembered how the world had called her a curse the day she was born. Now she feared her child might carry a burden even greater than hers. Still, she refused to let go. She said firmly, "This child is a gift. If God gave me strength to live with 2 heads, He will give this child strength too." But neither Amarachi nor Emeka knew that the strange glow on the baby's chest was only the beginning. Something far more shocking was waiting for them. Weeks turned into months, and the strange baby grew quickly. At just 6 months, it could sit up and stare at people with eyes that seemed far older than its age. Whenever visitors came, the child's glowing chest mark would pulse softly, and some would run out of the house in fear. Others whispered that Amarachi had brought a spirit into the world. One night, something happened that shook even Emeka to his core. A power outage swept through the neighborhood, leaving the entire area in darkness. As the family sat together in the sitting room, the baby began to hum again, but this time the sound was louder, vibrating through the walls. Suddenly, the chest mark glowed so bright that it lit up the whole room like a lantern. The other children screamed and clung to Amarachi. Emeka grabbed his wife's arm, his face pale. Then, out of nowhere, the baby spoke. Not in the broken voice of a child, but in a calm, clear tone that sent chills down everyone's spine. "Do not be afraid. I have come for a reason." The room went silent. Amarachi's 2 heads turned toward the baby in shock, tears filling her eyes. She had spent her life mocked for being born different, and now her own child had carried something even greater, something beyond human explanation. By morning, the story had already spread across the town. Some said the baby was a prophet sent from God. Others swore it was an evil spirit that must be cast away. Crowds gathered outside their gate, shouting and arguing. The family became the center of attention, not for mockery this time, but for fear and curiosity. Amarachi held her baby tight, whispering, "You are mine, and I will never let anyone take you." But in her heart she knew this was only the beginning. What the child carried was bigger than her, bigger than Emeka, and bigger than the entire community. And so the question that haunted everyone remained unanswered. Was this unusual child a blessing or a curse?